Hello everyone and welcome to the Constructive Criticism Network. This network is here to help you improve at Magic the Gathering at every level. From Pauper Leagues to Top 1000 Mythic, we've got you covered. If you want to hear the entire network, head on over to our sponsor at puremtgo.com, where you can hear each and every show, each and every week, and check out their sponsor, MTGO Traders, and tell them that the CCMTG Network sent you. Now sit back, enjoy the show. From YouTube, podcasts, and more, here's this week's episode from ConstructiveCriticism.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 102 of the Common Knowledge Podcast. I am your host, Christian, and as always, I am joined by my dashing co-host, Colton. How are you doing tonight, Colton?
Good. How are you, Christian?
Doing well, thank you. Before we get too far into this episode, I just want to remind everyone that Common Knowledge and all of the podcasts on the Constructive Criticism Network are sponsored by puremtgo.com. If you wanted to support the show, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Constructive Criticism YouTube channel, and check out our Patreon. That out of the way, let's get on with the podcast for the week. One more housekeeping thing that I did want to throw in before we got into like the main topic or whatever was that Colton and I have talked about it, and we're finally like ready to update Patreon. So some of the new benefits that will be put into effect this week are that I'm going to be writing any notes that I have for any decks that I've been playing every week, as well as a sideboard guide. And Colton also had something that he wanted to do. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so hopefully starting probably by the end of next month. I wanted to do it a little earlier, but due to current circumstances, probably won't happen. But I'm going to start trying to do some Patreon battles at least once a month where patrons can challenge me on stream to play some Pauper games and see how it goes.
That sounds like a lot of fun and a super good benefit. And then the one other thing that we talked about is that we're going to have a Discord channel opened up. That way, if people have any questions to submit to the show, or if they just wanted to chat with us or each other, they have an easy way to get in contact with us.
Yeah, we'll both be pretty active on the Discord, posting any updates we have about Pauper or any upcoming episodes, or maybe even some sneak peeks into some future topics. We're not quite sure yet, but we'll have a pretty good Discord channel for y'all.
Yeah, so if any of that interests you, just make sure to go on over there. All of it's just going to be under our $1 tier. So we figured that, it's the format with commons only, so we didn't want to charge you more than like the price of a deck would be in the format or anything.
No more than the price of a Delver.
But anyways, Colton, did you want to introduce what we're going to be talking about this week?
So just another bit of housekeeping before we move on to our main topic. We did have a Pauper Challenge this week, or the Pauper Challenge qualifier, and on Sunday, and the results were posted. That's going to be our main topic. Sadly, Wizards decided to switch out what would be the next Pauper Challenge for a Vintage Challenge instead. So there's not going to be another large MTGO Pauper event for the foreseeable future. We would like to see another one, but part of that is we do need to have the Pauper community grow. So, especially now where a lot of people are staying home due to quarantine, I think Pauper is the perfect, especially introductory format for MTGO. It's super easy to get into. I found, because I play a lot of different I played different formats on MTGO. I've played Modern, I played EDH, and I found Pauper is usually like the easiest one to get into, not just financially, but also the easiest to learn how to play and to learn the metagame and to learn, how the decks work, especially in a non-paper format. They're a lot less overall click intensive, and fewer mistakes are made, for at least for me, playing on Magic Online with Pauper than opposed to other formats. So, get your friends and play some Pauper online.
Just to clarify, I think that you may have misspoke. You said the Pauper Challenge. I think what you meant to say was the Showcase qualifier.
Yeah,
is the one that they had changed.
Well, no, it was the Showcase or something. I think it was the Showcase. There's a whole bunch of different names that they use, so I can't always remember them.
Yeah, it's Wizards OP does make it confusing on us.
Yep.
Yeah. But anyways, for the Pauper challenge that happened, there were, I think, some pretty interesting results. Um, so Flickertron won, which I don't think is too surprising, especially because that's what we had been talking about the past couple episodes. That like we had felt like that was like, if not the best deck, one of like the 2 or 3 strongest ones. The main surprise to me though was that Mono Black Control had 2 top 8s, finishing both 5th and 8th respectively, or sorry, 7th and 8th.
Yeah. I think part of the reason people played that deck is it can, if played properly, prey on the Tron decks a little bit. You do get to play some really good discard spells and some good graveyard hate. But I was actually reading some posts this week from Kendra Smith, those of you who know her, the Maverick gal, and she said, she's like, Mono Black is a deck that people love to play. She says it's never the best deck in the format. It probably never will be the best deck in the format unless something majorly changes. But it's a deck that people are very comfortable with. It's a deck that's not too hard to learn and to play over multiple rounds. And it's a deck that people really love to play. You know, Grey Merchant of Asphodel is some people's favorite card to cast. I love casting Grey Merchant of Asphodel. Do I think Mono Black Control is the best deck in the format? No. But it's just a really great fun deck to play.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think that this sort of points to something about the format that has always been like really interesting to me. Is that like even some of the decks that I wouldn't consider like the tier 1 decks or anything still have like a chance to do well, and like a chance to compete, because like how many times have you seen like somewhere on the internet like people that have been like talking about the Pauper format of like, man, I miss the days of Mono Black Control, et cetera, and like, well, here it is. Like the deck is still perfectly good and perfectly playable, and put up some pretty good results. I will say about those lists, something that I love out of them is actually the Liliana Specters on the sideboards. I absolutely love this card, and I love the fact that at some point someone killed a Liliana Specter and then it got unearthed. And
Yeah, I think that's one of the great things I love about this format is that sometimes you just find really weird, interesting cards that you would probably never see elsewhere, and they can just put in some real work. Let me pull up Liliana Spectre for everyone that doesn't know exactly what that card does. Oh, give me one sec. Do you have it up, Christian?
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and read it off really fast. So Liliana Spectre is a creature type Spectre. It's a 2/1 for black and a generic. It has flying, and whenever it enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. So a lot of times you'll see that these sort of come in where the I don't know how to pronounce it. It's the like 2 mana witches that ping a creature or player.
Quombage Witches.
Yeah, so a lot of times you'll see like those come out in like incredibly grindy matchups, and then they'll Specters back in or whatever. And I don't know, I just think that this card is actually phenomenal. The fact that it's flying means that it maintains relevance against some of the decks that you might bring it in against. Like even just as like it can come into play and it can block flyers out of like the red-white deck, the Monarch builds, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that card a lot.
Yeah, I think that the card is one of those cards that's either really, really good or is extremely terrible. So right now, I think this card is extremely good. Partially because of Tron being everywhere, and sometimes the easiest way to fight that deck, especially in a black-based deck, is just strip their hand apart. Part of the reason I think the black-white Pestilence decks still kind of hang around in Pauper, even though they're not really super tier 1, is that deck just preys so much on Tron. Like for Tron, I feel like that's one of their hardest matchups, just because, well, your Stonehorn is a 1/4, and all they have to do is land like some sort of 2 or 3 toughness threat, and then just use the Pestilence to slowly drain you out. And they also get black cards like Castigate that are discard that is to exile. so they don't get to reset up their loops through mnemonic walls and stuff like that, and ghostly flickers.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so out of Mono Black Control, I was pretty excited that it had not just one, but two copies of the top eight. And, it was also the only deck that put multiple copies into the top eight because rounding it out, we, of course, had, as I said, Tron at number one. And then we had the mono green aggro deck in second place. And then third, fourth featured the red white monarch deck, and then blue red fairies, the version without Delver. And then fifth through eighth had the two copies of mono black control. It had 5-color affinity, and then it also had a copy of Burn, I believe. Yeah, Burn.
Yeah, Burn took eighth.
So, the top eight was very varied. And then if you go on past that, you had blue-black teachings control at 12th, which I haven't seen that deck in a while. So, there's just a lot going on in the format, and that's always encouraging.
Yeah, it's good to see a good split of stuff. It's a lot. I think Pauper is a lot more diverse place than people like to think it is. Seeing it, especially like a deck like Mono Black that hasn't really, it's always been around, but hasn't done anything spectacular. Get 2 top 8 spots is really, really good to me. That's not just because I like that deck.
Yeah, and then even other things like in the top 8, like the Blue Red Fairies deck had something going on that I sort of wanted to talk about, which was the fact that it was playing 4 accumulated knowledge, which is man, absolutely love accumulated knowledge. The how it snowballs, stuff like that. It's just it's always been one of the more fun card draw spells, I guess, for me to cast. And I will say that looking at it, it seems sort of weird because I expected there to be more graveyard hate in people's sideboards this time around. But looking through the list, it doesn't look like people up that number at all. So it appeared to be the correct choice to just play this card that will absolutely grind out any of the slower decks. Yeah,
Accumulated Knowledge is one of those cards that I kind of have a love-hate relationship with. Sometimes I really love it, and sometimes I just hate it. Personally, right now, I think Of One Mind is in a better spot. But I could see why people want to play that card. It is good, but for my money, especially where the format's really slow right now, I think Of One Mind is just probably better. Not strictly better, but probably just a little bit better. But yeah, I can see why the Accumulated Knowledge is. My biggest complaint about this 75 for Scred is I still think playing Brainstorm over Ponder is wrong. That's a hill I will die on for forever. I think people highly undervalue how good Ponder is, honestly. That card is just insane. It lets you stack your deck or shuffle away crap you don't need. It's so good. I don't...
Yeah.
I think I disagree with some of the choices. I think the overall deck construction is solid. I disagree with some of the choices, but I think it's fine. Also, 3 Ash Barrens, 4 Evolving Wilds. Yikes. Don't like that.
Yeah, so I would probably just flip-flop those numbers. I will say I agree with you on Ponder. I think that Ponder is incredibly, incredibly good in this format, and I think in some cases can even be better than Preordain.
Ponder is a stronger card.
About Of One Mind, though, I think I played this. But if you want to take a more controlling stance, which I think this person wanted to do, I like Accumulated Knowledge a lot more because, in the late games, this can be drawing just absolutely tons of cards. So while, of course, you could still get the cost reduction from Of One Mind because Ninja is a human, I think not having Delver makes it just a little bit suspect.
Yeah, if you're not going to play Delvers, I think Accumulated Knowledge is right, but Also, I don't understand why people would not play Delver in a deck that plays 25 ways to flip it. Like, it's a 1 mana 3/2. Why would you not play that
Yeah.
card?
So, like I said, I think it's just like this person wanted to take like a more controlling stance, potentially because they felt like like the more controlling stance might give them better game against the more aggressive decks, like Boros or Mono Green. At least that would be my thinking. Like if I wanted to beat like the Boros or Mono Green decks, I probably would want to play like a slower build like this.
If I wanted to play beat Boros, yes. If I wanted to play beat Mono Green, no. I don't think that playing more draw spells is the way to beat Mono Green. I think you beat Mono Green with speed and with better removal, and with a faster kill rate, with a faster kill. I don't think that accumulated knowledge is the way that you beat Mono Green.
Right. So specifically, like accumulated knowledge isn't necessarily like what beats mono green. I think that having like a slightly slower deck is though, which I know that you said that you like to like try and like race to a degree. But I think, at least in my experience with the blue red deck, how I end up winning is that I sort of like one for one their stuff, and then whenever both decks are top decking, just like a little bit of card advantage can help you start to win. So like I basically just like to keep their board completely clear, and then just having a few more cards than them, you can like put together a win, I guess.
Yeah, I can see that, but I still disagree that like if you're gonna play no delvers, play a form of accumulated knowledge. I think the way that you beat them is one, play 4 lightning bolt. Why are you not playing 4 lightning bolt in your red deck? Like, I don't understand that. And the way I usually beat them is you just play flyers you just play things that they can't block, and you just try to poke them as fast as you can in the air and then bolt them in the face for game. Like, I don't usually try to grind out the green deck, because the green deck gets to play cards like weirding way and lead the stampede in their board, that they can just pay 2 mana, draw 3 cards. Like, that's just what happens sometimes. So I don't think that grinding out the green deck is usually the best plan.
All right. Yeah, so I think that this could actually be interesting whenever the Pauper challenges start. One of our patrons can play the mono green deck against you, or heck, maybe I'll do it, and we can test the different builds of blue red. Because I don't think this is something that you and I could like like we might be able to like see each other, but I would like be interested in finding the truth on this issue and see which one's better.
Yeah, we should probably do that sometime. I am liking the Echoing Truth in the sideboard of this deck a lot. I think Echoing Truth is a highly undervalued card in Pauper.
Yeah, so I don't know. I remember a few episodes ago we were talking about how the new blue bounce spell could potentially replace Echoing Truth. And I've come to conclude after playing a lot more recently that Echoing Truth is just the best in the genre. I absolutely love that card as well.
Yeah, I played a lot of Echoing Truths in my day, not only in Pauper, but also in Modern. This card is silly. This card does some really, really silly things. You play against the Battle Screech deck, and you just boop, your board's gone for 2 mana. Or you play against the Gurmag Angler deck, and they go Gurmag Angler, you go boop, their Gurmag Anglers just disappear and they can't come back. Like, you play against the Elves deck, and half their board disappears in 2 mana. Like, this card's silly. This card's so good. Or you play it against the Monarch deck, and they're like, they have to play their Core Skyfishers into Gilded Globe, into Core Skyfish, into Gilded Globe, and you go boop, and they pick up both their Core Skyfishers, and they're set back 2 turns. Like, that's so ridiculous. That's so good.
But yeah, so the blue-red build was something that was really interesting to me. And then also the the affinity decks, looking closer to like true 5-color decks, I guess. The one that top aided, actually, I think was closer to like a teamer deck. But some of the ones a little bit lower in the standings that were more of like a Jeskai build that were playing like Thraben Inspectors and stuff. I absolutely loved those. They were really able to take advantage of the card Of One Mind.
Yeah, Of One Mind is probably. I'm a hot take to say Of One Mind is one of the more underrated cards in this whole set. And not even just in Pauper, just like in general, that card is really good.
So, affinity players, why would you play 4 Thoughtcast when you could play 8 of them?
Exactly.
Like, I don't know. I really like the Jeskai builds, and maybe it's less to do like the person that top aided with like not wanting to play Of One Mind, and maybe they were like, nah, I'm not gonna play the 3/3 flyer and Thraben Inspector, because I do think that there is somewhat of a cost to playing Thraben Inspectors instead of Carapace Forger in your deck.
Yeah, Carapace
But
Forger is just a 4/4 for 2, which is pretty good. Pretty good rate. It dodges Bolt.
yeah, but still, like, I think that I would rather just play some number of One Minds and go ahead and bite the bullet to play the Thraben Inspectors myself.
Yeah, I'm going to do some testing on that probably this next week or so. I really like the Jeskai build. The one in the top 8, I think the deck is really solid. My biggest complaint is, my only real complaint, honestly, is, well, the Terminate in the sideboard is just weird. I don't understand why that card's there, honestly. Like,
Yeah,
you could play a whole lot of other cards in that slot without stretching your mana base to 5 colors. So I don't under the big black card that I've seen, of course, is the Storm card, Reaping the Graves, because that card's really good.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
The only real card I don't think that Gearseeker Serpent is worthy of a 3 of in the main deck anymore. That tends to be one of the first cards that I tend to cut in sideboarding, just because it can be so clunky, especially when you're trying to play you stretch out your mana base more. Getting double blue, it's really hard sometimes.
Yeah, so I don't have much experience playing Affinity. I will say, though, that the reason that I don't necessarily mind stretching the mana base to 5 colors with Terminate, even though I might play some other cards anyways, is because it feels like the games where my opponents either have turn 1 Navigator's Compass or turn 2 Prophetic Prism, those are the games that I tend to lose. In games where they don't do that, or I'm able to answer those cards, those are the games that I tend to win anyways.
Yeah.
Because without those, the deck just like has such horrendous mana that maybe this person just doesn't care, because they're like, if I have my mana fixing, like everything's okay anyways, and if I don't, I probably wasn't going to win that game.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like the one of Ancient Den, one of Alt Wizards, just kind of like YOLO. I think it's fine. I think it's just kind of weird to play a 2-color card in the sideboard like this. I don't know. I'm just like kind of confused by it. I can see like why you would splash like a single black card like a Doomblade or something, but I mean Terminate is a great Magic card. Don't get me wrong, but I don't know why you would play this over like a white card or a red card that can do something similar.
Yeah. I agree about that. But outside of that, I think the deck looks really good. Having the 2 Dispel main decks is something that I was a pretty big fan of.
Dispel's really good right now.
Yeah, it really is.
Countering Ghostly Flicker is big game.
Yeah. Dispel main deck also sort of tackles the new hotness of the format in a way.
The cycling deck?
Which, yeah.
No, this card doesn't do jack against the cycling deck.
Does it not?
No, Counter Magic is terrible against the cycling deck. I watched 2 whole leagues of that deck, and the decks that were able to beat it were the Castigate, Duress, Memory Leak decks. The decks that played Counter Magic got destroyed. That deck does not care about Dispel at all.
I mean, I don't really have much experience playing against it. I just assumed that like there would be some stuff that was pretty good against it.
So the way that you beat the Cycling Storm deck is the same way that you beat most Storm decks and any Storm deck. So Modern Storm, Legacy ad nauseum, Paradoxical Outcome, Tests. All the the big Storm decks, the 4 big Storm decks, Lotus Breach.
Yeah.
Those decks generally do not care that much about counter magic. That's always been a thing. The way that you beat the reason being is that they get to pick usually what you counter. So they will throw out cards that they don't care about to get countered. And usually they can generate enough mana behind it that just doesn't matter. The way that you beat those decks is with discard. That's part of the reason why Cabal Therapy was one of the and it was one of the most highly played cards in the format of Legacy for a long time, and why Thoughtseize has come back in that format, and why Thoughtseize is one of the most highly played cards in Legacy, Modern, and Pioneers, because discard is really what beats these types of Storm decks. Because the problem is that if you try to counter the first mana producer, I mean, that sucks, but they can try again next turn, usually. And you're leaving up mana every turn, and they can just kind of sit there and gather resources while you're waiting there with mana open every turn and not killing them. If you're actively playing discard, you're ripping the best card out of their hand. Now they have to try to dig and find the best card in their deck again.
Yeah, so specifically, whenever you talk about discards being good, I agree that discard is good. Part of my thinking with the Dispel is that how reliant they are. It's not just that they need the mana acceleration or whatever. Dark Rip, Cabal Ritual are good in that deck, but they are so much worse than the card Songs of the Damned that specifically countering that, that's the card that I'm interested in countering, right? The rest of it, I would counter in certain scenarios, but whenever I think of Dispel, against that deck, I'm specifically thinking let's counter Songs of the Damned, and if they don't have the second copy, their deck's just not going to do the thing. And if they did have the second copy, then you probably weren't going to beat that deck with any other options that you could play specifically in the Affinity deck, right?
Yeah, in the Affinity deck, it's fine. It's just the thought process that countering spells beats Storm is not a thing. I watched one this week where he fought through double counter spell on turn 4, and it just didn't matter. Fighting through double counter spell is a thing that can do, and it's very scary. I also watched it get double Bajuka bogged and still won.
Oh. I don't know. I guess this was something that you and I had sort of discussed, and we were wait, no, we have to save it, because I think that you feel really strongly about the Storm deck in one way, and I feel pretty strongly about it in the other way.
I feel like the deck is really strong. It's only been out for a week and a half. And so people haven't settled on which of the builds is best, because you have the Jund build, you have the mono black build, and you have the mono red build, and you have the green black build that are all kind of the 4 builds right now. And people haven't settled on which of those 4 is best. And Storm decks in general take a long time to learn how to play.
Yeah, so, and then there's also the other thing with it, that even within each specific build, people that have been sending me lists, or lists that I've been seeing, are still just they're all playing completely different cards. So even whenever we talk about the green black deck, for example, people that are experimenting with it are still even the green black lists that I've been seeing, unless they're just copy paste of the really big ones that Gannon has posted and stuff, Caleb Gannon. If they're not copy paste and they're trying to innovate at all or whatever, they're just so completely different of those lists versions.
Yeah.
That I don't know, it makes it really hard. I think I do agree that eventually this deck could be good. It's just that I don't think that if somebody's goal was hey, Christian, what deck should I play in Pauper if like I wanted to like win or whatever specifically, I don't think I would advocate for this deck because I think that all of the builds right now are like they just sort of fall apart to like obviously you said that like you saw it went through like double Bajuka Bog, but I still think that like the fact that like they need like so many specific pieces to even begin going off that like if you're playing like any sort of amount of like graveyard hate that's like reasonable or whatever and you can present a flop, I think that you're pretty likely to be able to beat that deck. And I think that as we see Tron like sort of slipping or whatever, which obviously it just won the challenge, so it might not be slipping, but I think overall representation Tron is starting to slip. And that means that the more aggressive decks are going to surge in the metagame. And so because of that, like I would not advocate playing the cycling deck right now, at least until it's more uniform and figured out if your main goal is to win. Like obviously like there are going to be people that like want to play it because they like it and they like they think it's good enough to justify playing it because they like it. But
Yeah, so the Storm deck is a deck I would play if you are used to that style of deck. If you are used to playing Lotus Breach in Pioneer, or if you're used to playing um, Modern Storm, or used to playing Ad Nauseam, Tendrils, or whatever, if you have played those types of decks before, like I'm comfortable playing that type of deck because that's my favorite style of deck. I play it in Modern, I play it in EDH, I've played it in Pioneer. I play that deck almost everywhere I can afford to play it. One day I hope I can pick up Legacy and other types of Storm, but that costs a lot of money, so who knows. But um, that's a type of deck that I like to play, so I would be comfortable playing it. If you don't, if you have not played Storm style decks like that, the hands are extremely unintuitive. They're extremely weird, and you have to get used to the fact that your deck can play as few as 5 lands. And that's
yeah,
really uncomfortable for a lot of people. And that's okay.
this is actually something that I wanted to talk about. You sort of mentioned that like you felt like if like you had played like Modern Storm or whatever that like you might be comfortable with this sort of deck. And I was just wondering like what similarities you saw other than like the like game plan of like how it actually wins or whatever and like what differences you saw. Because to me that was like the hardest thing that I had like wrapping my hand around was that like this looked like it was like a lot harder to get like deterministic or whatever, or like basically deterministic than like Modern Storm. Not saying that like Modern Storm's easy or whatever, but hopefully you understand like what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So like, how would you advocate like approaching this differently than the Storm deck in Modern? And how would you like advocate approaching it in the same way?
So this
What's
deck plays very similar to the Modern Storm deck. The biggest difference is you don't just get the free I win button with Gifts Ungiven.
Mhm.
So part of the problem that this deck has, as opposed to the Modern Storm or opposed to the Legacy Storm, is that in Modern you get the card Gifts Ungiven to tutor up your pieces so that you can go off. In Legacy Storm, you get Ad Nauseam, or you get Burning Wish if you're playing Epic Storm, that can tutor what you need. They can essentially tutor up what you need, right? What you have to think about with this deck, instead of tutoring, is almost every card in your deck is a cantrip. So what you're trying to do is essentially is you're trying to cycle through as many cards as you possibly can while knowing like your opponent's probably going to have graveyard hate at some point. And you have to be okay with discarding cards like your finisher, which to a lot of people is extremely, unless you're playing Reanimator, is extremely weird. So, what you have to do is you're essentially trying to find a song, one to two songs of the Damned, which usually is not very difficult to find, just because like you have 40 plus cycling cards in your deck, so it's not very hard to find, and a Reap in the Graves, and usually so usually you're trying to find 3 cards. You're trying to find a 2 mana Producers and Reap in the Graves. So the whole point is that you're trying to assemble this hand, which is sometimes hard, sometimes not. And the reason why you want the double mana producers is, first of all, so you can get your Reaping the Graves bigger, so you can get the higher storm count, and also because so you can cycle off more cards, you can get more stuff back, so you can keep going. And the other weird thing is that you also have to kind of realize that in this deck, lands are kind of bad. And it's really, really weird to a lot of to people who aren't used to it, that seeing lands is not a good thing. The most usually you want to top out at 3 lands. So like making land drops is actually kind of bad. And so having to cycle away lands when you're only on 2 lands is just really not intuitive. It's just really weird. So yeah, you just kind of think of everything as a digging for a Reaping the Graves and a couple of mana producers. And a Manamorphose, sometimes.
So I will say one thing about the deck: if like people were to decide to play against it, I've played against it a fair amount, and I think one of the most important things is people are really into trying to go off before they have to or before they can.
Yes.
I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Where they'll go for it and then they'll play for like 10 minutes, and the whole time like your opponent's sitting there, like sometimes your opponent's unsure, but like because I played against it a fair bit now, like I like know when they're gonna fizzle almost, or like know when like they're more likely to fizzle than to actually succeed. And so that would be the one skill that I would work on if I were looking to get into the deck, is just understand when you can go off and know that it's okay to wait even if you can, because sometimes you shouldn't go off until you have to, depending on the matchup.
Yeah. Decks like this also often require a very strong knowledge of the metagame, because you need to know what hate you're going to find. Are they going to play counter spells? Are they going to play discard spells? Are they going to play graveyard hate? And also you need to know how quickly do I have to go off. So like, for instance, I played one of the first times that I took Storm to a Blue-Red Storm to a Modern tournament. I knew exactly how much damage I was playing against a Merfolk deck. And I knew exactly how much damage he could do, and I knew that if he plopped down 2 lords, he could knock me down to 1. And I could have tried to go off that turn, but I was like, you know what? I don't have to go off right now. So I let him knock me down to 1 life, and I untapped and won the game. So you have to be really, really comfortable sometimes, and sometimes you're going to miscalculate. And a lot of your early losses and a lot of things that frustrate people is when you miscalculate, and then they're like, "Oh, you're playing at Spurn," and they go Swift, and they go like bolt, they go like bolt, sack 2 lands, fire blast you, and you just lose. And that's really frustrating. But sometimes you have to kind of like take those calculated risks of, okay, what are my odds to succeed if I try now, or what are my odds that they can kill me, and if I untap, do I succeed? Stuff like that. And that's really, really hard to do. It takes a lot of time to learn how to do that. I'm still not that great at it. Honestly, that's how I lose a lot of games, is going off at the wrong time. But that's like the hardest thing to do.
Yeah, but I don't know. And like I said, it's not like I absolutely hate the deck or whatever. And like I think the choice would be like fine, and I think it's going to get better as time progresses.
Yeah, it's a really part of the reason I'm so high on this deck is seeing a lot of pros hype it and talk about it a lot. Brian Namaris said that he was just like cleaning house. He found his list and he was just cleaning house 5-0 after 5-0 after 5-0 in leagues with it. But, you know, Brian Namaris is also a really, really good Magic player and really, really good at Pauper. And Mengucci, after Damaris posted his article, said that one of his buddies, I want to say it was a Legacy Challenge or something. It was some MTGO event, and he just decided to like kind of troll people with it in the Legacy event, and he top 8'd. So like the deck's power is there.
Yeah. So yeah, pretty much that. I am excited to see what happens, like whenever the lists become more uniform, or even if not more uniform, people start like figuring out like what the best cards are and just like recognizing what the play patterns are. Then I expect the deck to be really good for a while until all of your opponents adjust. Because something that I was surprised was is that it didn't look like people were packing as much graveyard hate as I thought that they would to fight this deck.
No, if you expect to see cycling, you should be playing graveyard hate.
I don't know. So like, especially like the proactive ones that sit on board that don't necessarily like hit the graveyard the turn that they come down. So like, I think Majuka Bog is fine against it or whatever, but I would much rather be playing like a spell bomb or relic or whatever.
Yeah. But Jukabog just happens to be a free roll, so people just play that card because it's in your mono black and blue black and those types of decks. It's not completely a free roll, but it's kind of free. So
yeah, it's a card that you were playing beforehand, I guess.
I mean, people were just playing it anyway, just because it was good at slowing down Gurmag Anglers and stopping flashback cards.
Yeah. But anyways, that's just our 2 cents on the new stuff going on. Was there anything else from the challenge that you wanted to talk about specifically?
Not really. I did see an 8th and a 9th burn deck. One of the discussions I saw today was whether or not burn needs a players can't gain life card, and I think it could really benefit from it, but I think Burns is just overall in just a really bad spot. Like Burns just really bad right now. when when most of your top decks are playing either white or green, it's generally not a good thing for you if you're playing them on a red deck.
Yeah, or like for example, if the like deck that like people sort of think might be like the actual best deck in the format is playing sometimes both Weather the Storm and Lone Missionary in their sideboard.
And sometimes like a life goes on or something too. Like yeah, it's really bad for burn right now. I feel bad, and I love that deck.
I do too, but as with all things, this will pass.
Yeah. But yeah, everything else was just kind of, you got some interesting lists up. If you guys want to check them out, they're up on the MTG Goldfish site, and they're also up on the Magic official site on for Wizards, and you can just go look at them and learn. Always learn from what other people are doing, what they're trying in the metagame.
Well, outside of that, I think that there was one thing that is only sort of Magic related that I wanted to talk about, and that was I played a match this week where I got to have like the nuts attack with Ulamog's Crusher with haste on turn 2 twice in a match. Games 1 and game 2 I did it. And my opponent was in chat and they said some very pleasant things, like actually pleasant, about how cool it was and about how like they were excited to play again, stuff like that. And so like I just wanted to highlight that. A lot of times whenever you see like screenshots from like Moto or whatever, it's like all negativity. And while I think that those can be like sort of funny sometimes, like a good chuckle, I think it's important to highlight how much good there is in the community, because I know personally if I had experienced like just having all of my lands blown up turn 2 games in a row, I would have probably been pretty upset, but my opponent handled it like a champ. And so I appreciate them, and I appreciate anyone that can respond to stuff like that in game with positivity.
Yeah, always be kind to each other. Don't be a salty jerk in chat.
But outside of that, I think that we should just jump into what sideboard cards we thought were good this week.
Yeah, what'd you like?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and start. I felt like Macro Spellbomb was in a really good position. So pretty much, as we already covered it a little bit, as the cycling decks get worked on more, I think people should be playing more Graveyard Hate in general. And I like the ones that sort of sit on board and you can kind of choose when you blow them up. And I think that Nihil Spellbomb just happens to be the best in the genre for the fact that it can also cantrip. But I'm not against cards like Relic or anything either.
Yeah, I like Nile Spellbomb. If you're playing a black deck, you should play Nile Spellbomb. If you're playing a non-black graveyard deck, I think you should play Tormod's Crypt in that slot. And if you're playing a non-black non-graveyard deck, you should probably play Relic. So what did you,
Anyways,
so yeah, so what did you like most about Nile Spellbomb?
yeah. So again, this is all in the context of I've been playing like mostly just the red black deck. Basically, like I found myself the red black deck is a deck that like you never want to sideboard too much, but I found myself bringing it in against like some matchups where like our opponent could pressure us just a little bit with like an early Gurmag Angler, just like over like some of like the bad cards that never did anything in any matchup. I would put it in just to like like just have a 1 mana play that could slow them down just a little bit. Because a lot of times with red black deck, WoW, you would love to just go off on turn 2. Like usually there's a lot more setup than that, and you're looking closer to turns like 4 to 5 when you're trying to do the little Mouse Crusher with haste thing. And so just being able to delay your opponent from pressuring you or putting out that blocker or whatever was pretty vital. But like I said, it was, I guess, less about like this past week and more of like just like coming up, like as there's these like graveyard oriented decks keep getting worked on. I'd like to have additional pieces of hate in my sideboard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think not packing graveyard hate is probably a miss. I'm seeing a lot of decks in the challenge that are not packing graveyard hate, and I think that's probably a bad idea, especially when Gurmag, even in the baseline when Gurmag Angler is like your usual the big bomby threat in the format. I think not delaying that, especially again if you're playing the faster deck against a slower deck, is not a good plan. So my card, it was in a similar vein, but mine was more kind of directly towards the against the cycling deck, and also can be played in the cycling deck in the mirror, and it's really good in the mirror. I think. I don't know why it hasn't seen as much play in the mirror, but it should be. And that's Fairy Macabre. So Fairy Macabre is like I think it's a 2/2 for 1 black, but you can discard it for free and exile 2 cards from an opponent's graveyard. So last week we were talking about when Christian was talking about sideboarding with the Reanimator deck, and I was like, why don't you have this card in your sideboard? I think that Fairy Macabre is a really, really good card for when for 2 reasons, against 2 different decks. If you expect a lot of Tortured Existence or Reanimator style decks where they're trying to pick up specific cards, it's really, really good because then they can go like Exhume and I gotta remember if does Exhume target or not. I can't exactly remember if it
No, each player just puts something in.
So, but usually they're not going to have more than 2 fatties, and if they are, it's probably pretty late anyway. And just being able to like boop their guy in response to waste, making them waste in Exhume is really, really good. And against decks like Cycling Storm, and in Cycling Storm, where you can discard it against your in the mirror match and pull out a couple pieces that you know that they need to get back, and then you can pick it back up again with Reaping the Graves, is really, really good. And against the Cycling Storm deck, you can also because they have to eat different things with the Reaping the Graves. At most of the time, what happens is that they'll do a small Reaping the Graves and then draw a whole bunch of cards and do a big Reaping the Graves. And one of the best times to stop that deck is to try to slow down and or stop the small Reaping the Graves. The problem is that you can't do that with Counter Magic because it'll only counter 1 copy of the Reaping the Graves. But if they go Reaping the Graves for 3, and you go discard Fairy Macabre, take away 2 of your take away your 2 best targets. Suddenly they just kind of wasted the Reaping the Graves. And you just set them back an entire turn for no mana, and you gain a whole bunch of tempo. And in that deck, in the mirror, you can do that to your opponent, and then on your turn, pick it up again with Reaping the Graves, and pop your opponent again if you have to. Like it's so good. So yeah, that's my card of the week. I personally also sometimes play this card in other formats too, specifically Modern. Usually it's kind of like a budget surgical extraction. But yeah, I think Fairy Macabre is always a card you should probably keep a couple of if you're expecting to see a lot of decks, a lot of heavy graveyard decks. So decks like Torture's Existence, or decks like Reanimator, or decks like Reaping the Graves Cycling Storm, where they need to pick up those couple few pieces, and it can really blow them out, especially game 2.
I agree. Fairy Macabre is a solid option. Again, this sort of goes back to the thing that I think we also talked about last week, that I think it's like one of those options. It's something that like I have been considering Reanimator as well, because like if you're like tapping out or whatever, just like getting to do it for free is what makes it so appealing.
Yeah, and
there's no like commitment to you. And
sometimes I learned with the Reanimator deck that you have to kill their Bogle or their Infect creature or whatever, and then you exhume, and sometimes they get back their Bogle, and they just plop all their stuff back on top of it again. And then you're like, because they've been sitting there for a couple of turns just drawing more auras and no Bogle, and you give them a Bogle back, and they just plop all their stuff back on. So just sometimes doing stuff like that too, where you are playing the Exhume deck, where you can take out their target that you had to get rid of earlier, is also pretty good.
Mm-hmm. But anyways, was there anything else that you wanted to talk about this week?
No, I think that covered it. If you guys want to learn more about the cycling deck, Brian DeMars has a really great article on it over on Channel Fireball. And Caleb, was it Gannon, right? Gannon? Gannon. Caleb Gannon. Mm-hmm. There's a whole bunch of Calebs. I can't remember all of them. Caleb Gannon has done a couple of leagues with it. He said he's kind of like, he's not going to play it for a little bit. He might come back to it later, but he's done a couple of leagues with it that I know of. So those are probably, like, if you're interested in learning about how to play that deck or how to play against it, those would be my two main places to start.
Yeah, those seem like invaluable resources to me as well.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Common Knowledge. If you guys wanted to get in touch with either one of us, you can find me on Twitter at JessGuyDad, and you can find Colton on Twitter at SnapBoltBaral, or you can shoot us an email over at thecommon.knowledgemtg@gmail.com. If you guys have any questions about anything, MTGO, Pauper, anything like that, you can just leave a comment down below or send us an email. I just want to say thank you again to our sponsor, PureMTGO.com, as well as the Constructive Criticism Network, for letting us be a part of it. And last, but certainly not least, be good to each other, and thank you all for listening.
Bye, guys.